Hello, everybody. My name is Cheri Fojtik, and I'm the current texture lead here at Image Engine in Vancouver. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the texturing process for Logan. Just going to play a quick video to kind of refresh your memory about the film, which won't work. There we go. While I talk. Before I get into the texturing, I've got to walk you a little bit through the beginning process of how we came to use the data that we used for these digidoubles on Logan. The first thing the team did, production and Martin Culpet, the visual effects supervisor, who you saw in the video before, did their research on digidoubles that have been done in the past. Like these types of movies here. They landed on using ICT, which is a capture company. It's well regarded down in LA, and they use a light stage like this to capture the likeness of the actor. A quick demo of the light stage in action. In return, we received these highly detailed, very accurate models from ICT, as well as a whole bunch of texture maps for use, and so much reference images that I couldn't possibly show them all to you here. So the next stage is obviously to get a really nice model before we can move on to texturing. The modelers took all of the reference images, the scan data, and they fixed the model to be a really good CG model. As you can see here, the eyes are very soft, so they fixed all of those so it could be animatable and so on. Just a quick turntable of the final model for X24. And then the next stage for me was to get some nice UVs on this model before I could start texturing. However, the ICT textures that we received matched the ICT model UVs. So the first thing I've got to do is get those textures to work on the in-house image engine model. The modelers helped me out with this quite a bit by lining up the ICT model that you see there with our image engine model almost precisely. We actually did quite a few renders before we had it lined up. We had to go back and retransfer textures 3 or 4 times, and you could tell the difference. Like something was always just a little bit off whenever they weren't lined up properly. So I ended up with taking this, and then we ended up with this. This is on my image engine models, model UVs. So in the end, I ended up with all my textures transferred that I thought I would need to start this project. So now I can get to the fun part, painting in Mari. Before I start any project, I of course do my homework. And I find, sorry, this is just a quick close-up to show you a preview of the incomplete texture data. The first thing I do is gather all the reference and images that I think I'm going to need to begin the project. The obvious place for me to start is with the reference images and the textures that we received from ICT. That's the obvious point of reference for me to complete all of my work. However, I still gathered tons of other human reference for skin textures and that kind of thing. And additionally, we found more scan data online, such as texturing XYZ and surface mimic, because we had to hand paint the rest of the head, the face, the hands, and so on, and just extra details for filling in all of those holes, which I'll get to in a minute. So in the end, you can see my Mari image manager and how much stuff I gather whenever I'm painting a project like this. This isn't even everything. I tend to clean out my Mari image manager as I work. So this is just a snippet. So I'm just going to start by showing you a little bit of projection painting in Mari and how I would start painting the color. I took that ICT image, which you're going to see me pull over into the projection plane here, and I'm just going to start cleaning him up and filling in the holes, painting out the hair because we ended up doing a real groom on these characters. And I'm constantly just checking my scale to make sure that I'm not painting too out of range of what's already there. Logan actually had an extra scar that we were missing in the first scan that we had, so I had to paint that back in, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to use the rest of those textures to fill in the holes for the scalp and the rest of the body and so on. And in the end, this is my final Logan color in UV and flat texture view, clothing and everything. So the next part is talking about displacement and specularity. Now we had these two great maps from ICT, and because they both have very detailed pore detail, we want those to line up exactly, like pore to pore detail, in order to get the best result in the render. So I didn't want to sit there and hand paint these and then try to line it up manually. So one thing that Mari allowed me to do was paint with a multi-channel EXR. I took that displacement and I dropped it in a channel and the specularity in another channel, and I added the occlusion just because I thought I might need it. So with that, I could do painting like this using Mari, and then I can just tell Mari which information I want for each channel. So I'm doing the same thing I did for the color. I'm just cleaning things up, removing the hair and so on. And then I'm just going to set my channel read to tell me, okay, I just want the specular out of that to show up. And you can see I'm painting with that funky looking map that I have to tell Mario what I want. And then I can share that data with my displacement channel and then just switch it to tell it what I want. And it saves me a lot of time and a lot of headache trying to do both maps independently. There you can see where I'm switching it back and forth between disp and spec just to give you a little preview. And then back to specular. Here's just a snapshot of how that works in Mari using the layers. You can see in my spec channel, there's a layer that I'm using as my cleanup, and then I'm just dropping it into that displacement layer, and it automatically gets updated any changes that I make throughout the course of the project. Another thing that Mari does that's really great for me is that it allows me to, this is the same process and I'm just painting down in the displacement instead of specular, but I can switch to shaded view, which allows me to kind of spot check my work as I'm going along. And it's really great because I like to work in both, so I can switch back and forth really easily from the flat view, which you see here, to the shaded view, which you see here. And this is great for making sure my scale of my pores are correct, that I'm not painting down too softly, that kind of thing. And it just gives me a really nice representation of what we might see in the final shader. And I'm just turning it off and on to show you how I can kind of spot check my work as I'm going as well. And just a quick preview of side-by-side comparison for you of shaded versus flat view. And then the next most important part that's using the same function is that on Logan, we had two characters. We have Logan, who has scars, he's older, that kind of thing, and X24 is his younger clone with a slightly bigger nose. Now, because we have two characters, but they're the same actor, yes, we had different scan data for their main part of their face, but why am I going to redo the same thing twice, like painting his ears, his scalp, his body, and so on? So you can see I'm kind of showing you a preview of something that I just shared between all the characters for all of my passes. So I painted on Logan, for instance, and I cleaned up his scalp, his ears, and so on. And then I just copied that and had it connected to my other characters for X24. So I'm basically getting two characters for the price of one, which is really great. Because then as we worked on the project and we made a lot of changes and it evolved, like at one point we had to fix the ears. We weren't happy with it. It wasn't close enough to Hugh Jackman's ears. I went and fixed it in that one layer and it automatically updated in the other. And I didn't have to think about it. I could just export both. And that was the only part I had to think about. It was really great. This is just a quick texture buildup cleanup pass of Logan, just to show you the process. And the same thing for X24. And just a quick breakdown of one of the shots from the film to show you how some of this work fits in. So moving on to the look dev part of texturing and getting this guy done. This is what I ended up with. These are my final key passes, displacement, specular, and color. So now I need to show you how we got from that to that. It's not as simple as, oh, those 3 passes are done. We can just get it done. So first thing I had to do, become best friends with my look dev artists. And I can't stress this enough. Communication is so important whenever you're working on something like this. We definitely got on each other's nerves at some point, but in the end, we worked really well together and are still really good friends. This is just a little preview of some of the supporting textures that are created for Logan to get it to look that amazing in the look dev. Isn't all of them, but I'm going to go through some of the key ones just to kind of talk about it a little bit. But before those, the first thing we did was grade the textures into the right color space. This made a huge difference. There was a point where you can see the before grade is kind of yellowy, which kind of indicates like maybe a little bit sick feeling. But after we got the correct grade matrix node that we applied in Nuke, we were able to get a much nicer render that was much more realistic. It made a huge difference. The next thing we did was we took that displacement map that I cleaned up and we split it out. And the fine disp is so fine you can't even see it, but it's just think about super fine detail on the surface. And then we split out the broad displacement, which we're going to use as a true displacement on the character. Area maps, because these help define subsurface, specularity, bump, intensity, even the way the skin reacted under the hair. It all made a huge difference in the final render. Specular roughness, because we have different shiny versus not so shiny bits. Wetness mask, because everybody's got that wetness around their eyes, and a sculpted displacement from modeling. And a micro detail map, because it added this little extra softness to the specularity, especially at the glancing angle of the spec. And hair color masks, because hair color in a hair color mask, because Logan had gray hair, but it wasn't all over. And I gave them a mask of different values just so that they could tweak it in comp as well as look dev. Even so far as sweat maps with sweat displacement, because we were going for true realism. And so it created a mask for the individual drops versus the area because we wanted that extra sheen, and then like a true sweat displacement. Here you can see a look dev render and in the shot where the sweat just helped him fit right into that shot. And a quick breakdown of that. So just to show you a little preview of the shader graph node, this is Gaffer, our image engine proprietary tool. On your left is the wide view that includes the hair, the clothing, everything. And then I just blew up the skin shader, the main one that I'm talking about. So you can see where all the textures are going in and how crazy complicated that could get with all of those. But I broke it down into something very simple that you can understand a little bit. So you can see how the specular roughness goes with the multipliers of those area maps. And then all of that goes into spec and bump and displacement to create different areas on his face. So for instance, where he was a little bit more oily, the bump was a little bit less. That also contributed to how shiny the spec came out and so on and so forth. Using the fine displacement and the specular maps. And then the sculpt displacement is added to that broad displacement that we created to create the final look of the surface of the skin. Here's a great look dev render of X24. And Logan. And I'm showing this to go back to that light stage reference that we showed in the beginning, just to give you an idea of how much we paid attention to every angle of spec and subsurface on the characters to achieve the realism that we ended up with in the film. So the next big thing with Logan and X24 was character states. Throughout the film, they're getting clawed, they're getting shot, all of that fun stuff. So you can see how we didn't want to include this in the base. So we created all these blood and dirt masks to create these states of the characters. And one great thing that I used Mari for this is that I could build them up, but still keep them separate so that I could always have that first state, and then he went on to a next state where he got shot again or bled a little bit more. And so I could preview that and then give that to that look dev artist, and he could build them up as well. And we can get these great just states with blood all the way up until the end. Spoiler alert, when he dies. And just a quick breakdown of how those blood masks work. This is called Logan's run in the film at the studio. And even this shot right here, one thing Mari let me do is I back projected that into the full CG character using the shot camera data and then just the plate, and brought all of that information into Mari so that I could get the exact blood drips that were on the real Hugh Jackman to work on this on the CG Hugh Jackman. And Rounds, my VFX supervisor, was even like, "It looks like you projected the plate. How did you do that?" And it's like, well, that's exactly what I did. Same thing for X24. Blood masks that we can just build up again, and I can preview them in Mari before I hand them off to my look dev artist to make sure they look nice. And that's it for that part. The next bit I'm going to talk about is just a little show you how committed we were to making these characters look as realistic as possible. For X24, there's a shot where he's walking down the stairs, revealing himself for the first time to Logan, and that was our pride and joy shot. So we sat there and studied the reference that we received over and over again. So one of the first things we did, because X24 had a prosthetic nose, we didn't like the nose, so we replaced it with a real one because it was too fake for us. So we did that. We even added more forehead lumpiness because it was just a little too CG and smooth. And even as much as adding some really subtle wrinkles that you can see here. I'm sure Hugh Jackman would love that I made his wrinkles deeper, but... And even going as far to add this little scar that Hugh Jackman has that didn't show up in our scan data because his eyebrow was in the way, so it didn't scan. And I think we redid that scar 3 or 4 times until we had it just right. And here's a quick breakdown of that shot. That's it. Thank you for coming.